4 years before Abraham Lincoln was assassinated inside Ford's Theater. Another alleged plot may have come close to killing him. This time, Lincoln was not yet president. He had no Secret Service protection, no secure motorcade, and no guarded route into Washington. He was traveling by train through a country breaking apart. His schedule had been printed in newspapers. Thousands of people knew where he would appear. And in Baltimore, Maryland, detectives believed a group of men was preparing to make sure he never reached the White House. If the warning was real, the plan was not to attack Lincoln in some isolated place. It was to strike in public, create confusion, separate him from protection, and kill the president-elect in the middle of a crowded American city. In November 1860, Abraham Lincoln won the presidency on a platform opposing the expansion of slavery into new territories. His victory triggered a national crisis. Before he was inaugurated, 7 southern states declared that they were leaving the Union. A Confederate government began taking shape. Federal property was seized. Across the country, threats against Lincoln multiplied. Yet on February 11, 1861, Lincoln left Springfield, Illinois, on a public journey to Washington. Over the next 12 days, he traveled through major northern cities, delivered speeches, greeted crowds, and tried to reassure a nation moving towards civil war. The journey was designed to display confidence, but it also exposed him. The most dangerous stop was Baltimore. Maryland was a slave state that had not seceded, but Baltimore was deeply divided. Many citizens supported the Union. Others openly sympathized with the Southern cause. The city also had a reputation for political gangs, street violence, and election day intimidation. More importantly, Baltimore's railway system forced passengers to cross part of the city when changing trains. According to Lincoln's published schedule, his train would arrive at Calvert Street Station on February 23rd. He would then travel by carriage for roughly a mile to Camden Station before continuing to Washington. For that entire transfer, Lincoln would be visible in the streets. That weakness attracted the attention of Allan Pinkerton. Pinkerton was a private detective originally hired by Railroad President Samuel Felton to investigate threats against the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad. Felton feared that secessionists might destroy bridges, damage tracks, or cut Washington off from the north. Pinkerton entered Baltimore under an assumed identity. His agents visited taverns, hotels, private meetings, and political gatherings. Among them was Kate Warne, widely regarded as America's first female professional detective. Warne posed as a Southern sympathizer, using an assumed name, a Southern accent, and a cockade showing support for the South. She gained access to circles where men spoke more openly than they would around a suspected detective. Pinkerton later reported that his agents had uncovered a plan to attack Lincoln during the transfer between Baltimore stations. A disturbance would supposedly draw police away. Armed men would move through the crowd. Lincoln would be surrounded before he understood what was happening. But the evidence was far from complete. There was no written plan, no captured weapon, and no confession tested in court. Most of what Pinkerton knew came from undercover conversations, informants, and his own interpretation of what his agents had heard. Even so, he believed the danger was immediate. Lincoln's train was already approaching the East Coast. Every newspaper announced where he would be next. On the evening of February 21st, inside Philadelphia's Continental Hotel, Pinkerton finally met the president-elect. He told Lincoln that men in Baltimore intended to kill him. He urged him to cancel the public route, leave in secret, and pass through the city before the alleged conspirators knew he was coming. Lincoln listened carefully. Then he told Pinkerton he could not leave yet. The next morning, he had promised to appear at Independence Hall. After that, he was expected in Harrisburg. He would not break those commitments simply because of a threat that had not been proven. Pinkerton had found the man he was trying to save, but he had not yet convinced him that the danger was real. At dawn on February 22, 1861, Abraham Lincoln entered Independence Hall. Only hours earlier, he had received not one warning, but two. Pinkerton had described a possible attack in Baltimore. Then Frederick Seward arrived with a separate message from his father, William Seward. The warning came through General Winfield Scott, commander of the United States Army. The reports did not prove that a complete assassination plan existed, but they came from different sources, and both pointed toward the same city. Inside the building where the Declaration of Independence had been adopted, Lincoln spoke about the principle that all men were created equal. He said he would rather be assassinated on that spot than surrender the ideal on which the nation had been founded. The words were striking, but Lincoln still refused to abandon his public duties. After raising a new 34-star American flag, he continued to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, as promised. There, he addressed the state legislature and met Governor Andrew Curtin. To the public, the schedule remained unchanged. Lincoln was expected to stay in Harrisburg overnight, then travel through Baltimore the next day with his family, advisors, and reporters. Behind closed doors, however, a different journey was being prepared. By late afternoon, Lincoln had agreed to Pinkerton's plan. At about 6:15, he quietly left a dinner with Governor Curtin through a rear exit. He replaced his familiar tall silk hat with a softer beaver hat and wrapped a shawl around his shoulders. The disguise was simple. He was not dressed as a woman. He was not hidden inside a freight car. Those details were later invented or exaggerated by newspapers and political cartoons. Lincoln only needed to avoid immediate recognition. Ward Hill Layman, his close friend and unofficial bodyguard, accompanied him. A special train carried the two men back toward Philadelphia. Lincoln's family and most of his official party remained behind, unaware of every detail. The operation depended on secrecy. If word reached Baltimore, anyone waiting for Lincoln could change plans. Around 10 that night, Lincoln arrived in Philadelphia. Pinkerton met him and moved him to another station, where a public night train was preparing to leave for Baltimore. Kate Warne had already reserved sleeping berths. To avoid attention, she posed as a woman caring for an ill relative. Lincoln became the supposed invalid. He entered the sleeping car with Pinkerton, Warne, and Lamont. There was no armored carriage, no military escort, no presidential security service. Only a narrow berth, a thin curtain, and 3 people trying to keep the most recognizable man in America unseen. The train left Philadelphia late that night. Lincoln remained calm, but the danger hadn't passed. Ahead lay Baltimore. The public expected him there the following afternoon. Instead, sometime before dawn, he would enter the city in darkness. And the most vulnerable part of the journey was still waiting for him. At about 3:30 in the morning on February 23, 1861, Lincoln's train entered Baltimore. Most residents expected the president-elect many hours later. Instead, he arrived in darkness, hidden inside a sleeping car. The train could not travel directly through the city. At President Street Station, the sleeping car was detached. A team of horses pulled it along rails in Pratt Street toward Camden Station, more than a mile away. Lincoln remained behind the berth curtain. Kate Warne maintained the appearance of caring for a sick relative. Allan Pinkerton watched for danger. Ward Hill Layman stayed close, prepared to protect Lincoln if the car was stopped. There was no attack. No crowd surrounded the train. No suspected assassin appeared. The car reached Camden Station, was connected to a Baltimore and Ohio train, and continued toward Washington. At approximately 6 o'clock that morning, Lincoln stepped onto the platform in the Capitol. Illinois Congressman Elihu Washburne was there to meet him. The president-elect had survived. But the controversy was only beginning. When newspapers reported that Lincoln had entered Washington secretly, political opponents mocked him. Cartoons showed him hiding beneath ridiculous disguises or fleeing Baltimore in fear. Some accounts falsely suggested that he had dressed as a woman. Lincoln later regretted the appearance of his arrival. His advisors, however, believed the warnings were serious enough to justify changing the route. The deeper question has never been resolved. Did Pinkerton uncover a coordinated assassination conspiracy? Or did he combine violent talk, informants' reports, and Baltimore's dangerous political mood into a plot more organized than the evidence supported? There was reason for concern. Pinkerton's agents had worked undercover. Kate Warne reported threats from pro-secession circles. A separate warning had reached Lincoln through General Winfield Scott and William Seward. Baltimore was deeply divided and had a history of political violence. Less than 2 months later, hostile civilians attacked Union troops during the Pratt Street riot. That violence does not prove assassins were waiting for Lincoln in February, but it shows that fears about Baltimore were not imaginary. The evidence also had serious limits. No complete written plan was recovered. No accused assassin was convicted. No trial established exactly who intended to do what. Pinkerton later published dramatic accounts, while laymen disputed parts of his story. On March 4, 1861, Abraham Lincoln took the oath of office as the 16th president. 4 years later, on April 14, 1865, John Wilkes Booth shot him inside Ford's Theater. There is no reliable evidence that Booth was part of the alleged Baltimore Plot. The two events must not be treated as one continuous conspiracy, but history left behind a haunting parallel. In 1861, Lincoln accepted a warning, changed his route, and survived. In 1865, another conspiracy reached him. The first time, a secret train carried him safely through the night. The second time, there was no escape. We may never know whether organized assassins truly waited in Baltimore. But Lincoln reached Washington, entered the White House, and led the nation through the Civil War. For one night in February 1861, the future of the United States may have depended on a curtained sleeping berth, a horse-drawn railway car, and a warning that history could never completely prove.